This is me. I used to be a software engineer some years ago, so I'm actually the right guy to talk about the front-end UI library. And pretty large disclaimer, I never used it. Why am I still talking here? Because that's what I'm good at. And I try to share some of our experiences as a company, because as I've never used it, I'm actually still the reason, or one of the reasons why we use it. And it's pretty new for us. We're using it since a few weeks, so everything we can share is like right from the moment, and we're figuring it out as we go, so we're still having questions ourselves. So as I said, I used to be a software engineer. I'm not a software engineer. Like what I do most these days is sales. I wear many hats, but one of my biggest hats is the sales hat, which needs a lot of communication and creativity and maybe not as much realism. My other hat that I wear a lot of the times is the project manager, which also uses a lot of communication, creativity, and maybe a little bit more realism. I also wear a hat as a content creator, which is why I'm trying a new live stream setup for an event that I will pitch to you later. And I used to wear this hat, which is pretty old now for me, which was a software engineer, which doesn't need as much communication, but maybe the most realism of all of these hats. So a salesman is talking about shadcn. Why is this? It started, like you see, it's not even, yeah, it's to the date 2 months ago that I asked in our help channel in Slack if anybody has an idea what library I could or we could use, because I will not use it, that contains a good table, because we're working on a project which is more like an application and less than a fancy website which uses a lot of tables, and it needs to be able to shift around columns and resize columns and like sort things. And after I sent this message, there came a lot of different answers, but it all in some way tied to this new library. Somebody suggested Radix, which is the thing behind this library, and another one suggested the library directly. Another one suggested the table that is basically what Radix was. So it was like, oh wait, even the UI designer on this project just a few days before said to me, there's this new library, you have to try it out, and it was this one. So it was kind of a moment where, oh, there's something new, the entire community is excited about it, maybe let's try to use it. A salesman talks about shadcn. What I would say, you get initially components that you can also adjust later, which is, in my opinion, perfect for applications, maybe technical UIs, maybe even a landing page for like a SaaS application, a website, which, as we know, we're not as used to very nice and fancy designs. We rather like straight and nice informations. I personally, I don't think I would use it to create a fancy, flashy UI with animations, because I think I would start with custom components anyway. As I said, I tried to share some other opinions, not just them of a salesman, also of a designer, which in this is Alex. He supports us in one of the projects that we use it, and he was the one that suggested it to me like a few days before all the software engineers also suggested it. And basically what he says is he doesn't have to think about how a dropdown should work anymore, and he can just like care for other things that are way more important than the details of a dropdown. And he works with this now also for like 2 months. He tried something a little bit more, and he also really likes it. I also asked a software engineer, which is here today, which helps me a ton, because if you guys have questions, we're gonna just ask her. She's here in the crowd. Like if I try to translate this, it takes me too long, but it was exactly what she said to me, like word by word in a call. And it was a bit pessimistic from my opinion. It was like, we actually don't lose anything, so why not using it? But later she also talked a lot about what she likes about it. And then I'm gonna share some of them What's shadcn? It's basically, that's entirely the sentence that they have on their website. And I think it's my only English slide. A set of beautifully designed components that you can customize. And for me, the customize thing is one of the biggest benefits. So it's just like any other UI component library. You find an entire list of all the things that everybody of you builds year after year, again and again. It's buttons, it's drop-downs, it's alerts, it's calendars, it's all the things. And you get a really good documentation, how to use it, what's the features of these components. But if we try to understand what it actually is and why it's new compared to other UI libraries that were there before, I wear my project manager hat and show you a Venn diagram. And it's basically a combination of different things. On the top, we have CSS, which we will hear more about today after my talk, which is used in the form of Tailwind in this library. You have Radix UI, which is just a headless component library that kind of worries about all the mechanics of a component, like we said, like a calendar widget or whatnot. And then we have like the opinionated designs that come from libraries like Bootstrap and Material UI. And if you combine those three things, you get something like this. And that's also why it's different to them, because they approach it kind of differently. And one of the biggest differences to me, and why like my old hat as a software engineer was like, oh, right, nice, really, there's really something new, is you're not importing the components as a package. You're basically, if we're talking real, just copy-pasting code, which sounds bad, but the biggest benefit is that you have the component as code in your library, and you can customize it. And that's one of the biggest pains. I think everybody that worked with Bootstrap or Material or anything like this knows this. Like, you have your limitations. It's like, oh, I need to change this and that, and then you start to use like deep CSS hacks, and you try to do different things. And the ecosystem around the library actually helps you importing those components, so it's not just copy-paste, and there's some other benefits. But to me, that's the biggest difference, and that's what makes it way more flexible than the older libraries. You get a CLI tool. It's really as simple as this. When Nando wrote the LinkedIn post to announce my talk here, he asked me, will you do a live demonstration? And I said no, for multiple reasons. One, I don't have the setup anymore. And two, I need to prepare the slides first. But also, like, it's kind of boring to show you, because what you do all day is basically importing components. You could just copy paste the code, but there's a CLI tool that helps you and does some different things. When you import a component, it also recognizes like your existing components and can like fix the paths to other components if they're like embedded into each other. And after that, you basically just use the button as shown in here. Like, the button is the simplest example. But there's something more that also kind of separates this library from the others. When we're back at this Venn diagram, we extend it like professionals do. And there's a Figma UI-Kit with it. That's also not the first library that has this. I think Bootstrap has about 20 of them or more. But it's a really well thought out design system that's behind it. And the UI-Kit also, if you pay the appropriate version, comes with a plugin that helps you with some other things. The UI library in Figma looks something like this, where you have all the components exactly like they're built in the library. And the author behind this Figma UI-Kit really cares and really tries to stay ahead of like the changes that they do. That's also why it costs something. We didn't even thought like 2 seconds about buying this, because like the benefit you're getting and the amount of work for like $1,000 is ridiculous. And you get updates for I don't know how long. They promise a lot of things. They have over 2,000 components. It's also a huge icon library integrated. There's Pro blocks, which is like an extended version of the library. So they're combining different things. I'm gonna show them. And the workflow will look something like this. You'd have your Figma UI-Kit, which you can get for free, I think, in a version. I'm not even sure. Just buy it, help the author. It's better for everybody. Sales pitch. No, it's really like, it's worth it. And if you're working for some nonprofit, I'm pretty sure you can get like a discount and whatnot. The UI-Kit can be used to basically develop your Figma prototype. I'm going to share some insights on what you should care about. And when the Figma prototype is ready, you have two things that help you with this, which is the Figma plugin or the CLI command that helps you, which helps you basically get the designs in your code. And that's not just about the button. Oh, I realize I have this slide double. Here's with some explanations. The plugin looks something like this, where you have a component in Figma, you can select it, and you can also generate the code for this entire thing. So this could even be, and was in our case, like a custom component that just uses some shadcn buttons and inputs and whatnot that your UI and UX designer has created. You select it, you generate the code, and you copy it over. The plugin does also some other things. Like you can imagine, it's a design system, so it also uses all the variables features of Figma. So you should just change the variables, which we learned the hard way, but you should just change the variables. And if you do this correctly and work with the design system as intended, the plugin also basically helps you to export all the CSS variables into your project. So all the colors and spacings and whatnot that your designer has defined, if he has done it correctly, will land in your application. It also goes the other way, by the way. So if over the years there has been some changes in the code, you can also export it back the other way and get them into sync. In our example, unfortunately, I cannot show a lot of the application because it's under an NDA for another few months, but that's a component that I can share that will not help you understand what it is. And it is a custom component that the UI designer created in Figma. It's a screenshot from Figma that you could then select with the plugin and say, let's give me the code. And he recognizes that this was a shadcn button, imports the button the correct way inside the code, and you save a lot of time. There's also the Pro components, which are basically like the premium promise feature. Of course, you have to build something in there. We tried some of them out. If anybody knows like the Tailwind UI libraries, it's very similar to that. It's just like a bigger combination of complex things like navigations, like hero sections or some interactive things that are also built from shadcn components that you then can copy over into your project, which helps you save time. So what we listed, or what I listed after the discussions with the people who actually use it, the pros that we think it's very cool integrated with Next. It uses all the features that you would use. It's not that you had to change a lot of the things. I realized this text was not updated. The tables, which is basically why we chose it, are amazing. You get like drag and drop of the columns, you get sorting, and like we have a really complex filter concept that we have to build in there, and it's actually very easy to do this because it's open, it's your code, and you can change it, and you don't really have to work around like the things how Next.js was thought to do this, because it's just copy paste. The form validation is great, like something a lot of you probably have built multiple times, which is also always a pain. It uses exactly the SOD library that we would use anyway, so it's kind of like full circle. It uses the libraries that are like today used. It works very fast, except for 2 employees that figured it out the hard way this week. And I think now we're using it in 3 projects, and another one will be coming. There's some things to go wrong, but if not, it's really amazing. And it's amazing to get clean designs really fast because it's a very well thought out design system. I wrote some other stuff, like you can combine it with entire custom components, and you can combine it really deep. There's a huge icon library in there. It uses the Figma variables, as I said, and it considers all the paths that you have in your repository when you export and import it. Of course, there's also the cons. We don't think it's like for flashy UI designs. We sometimes do websites that live more from like parallax effects and 3D animations or whatnot. I think it's not worth it for something like this. Also, the code style, we all have our opinions. I think we could fill the entire evening talking about them, but there are opinions, and they do it maybe a little differently than we would. So for every OCD developer, there comes a question, now should we reform it? Should we do something that it adheres to our linting style, or should we leave it alone? It kind of feels weird to have code in your code base that's not to your standard. If that's better or worse, it doesn't matter. There's some components that have like text in them. There's very few, but if they have them in there, they did not localize it. I think it would just be one thing too many to build into a UI library, so you will have to touch them and like localize the content. If you have to support multiple languages, which in Switzerland you almost always have to do. There's a question of like, what do we do with components that we had to change? We're not entirely sure how to deal with them because it will happen. Like, are we just gonna slowly move away from the original system, and what's gonna happen to the Figma UI-Kit? We're not sure where this goes. We just started. And I just realized, like, as a designer, it's a really opinionated design system, and it's really well structured, but you have to work with that. If you don't, like, as a UI designer, work with very strict design systems, it kind of becomes cumbersome, which one of our employees doesn't necessarily really like too much to do. The other one says, hey, it saves me time in the end, so it's well okay for me to kind of get to know the system, how it works, and it's how a huge design system always works. Yeah, that's about everything I can talk about. No demos, nothing, no more. I hope I could bring it to you a little closer. Any questions, I hope Selin will help me to answer them. I know there's also other people that also already have worked with them, so I think we can just go into a little discussion. Maybe not too long because we have a second amazing talk, but yeah, shoot ahead. Nothing? It's also good. Then we get faster to the beer. There's just two slides left. The one is for Robert. He also used to be a software engineer. He's not anymore. He now does amazing events, which is in about 2 weeks. If you're interested in all this stuff, visit the link and see us again at the pitch night. Thank you so much.
So while we wait, who has used shadcn before? How much was wrong of what he said?
Yeah. That's great.
Who has bought the UX toolkit? Who has bought the $1,000 you said?
Yeah, I think.
Nobody? Nobody bought it? Wahrscheinlich noch Sales Fire.
Ah, das ist schon Fullscreen, ne? Ja, das passt.
Ich dachte, dass Galaxus auf Liquid Glass umstellt.
Ah, nein. Also, schauen wir mal. Im Moment sind wir so ein bisschen am App rumspielen. Also wenn, dann höchstens in der App.
Okay.
Ich hoffe nicht.
Gut. Now we will... Machst du Deutsch oder Englisch?
Ist mir wie gleich.
Okay, in dem Fall.
Ja, ist okay.
Good, so spontaneously we switch to English, I have heard. And now we start with Jan, who will show us CSS at Galaxus. And again, if you want to stand here and do a talk in German or English, ping me please at the 7th. Ping me, so for the 17th of September we're still looking for speakers. And after this talk at 8:30, we will also get pizza and beer from smartive. So thank you very much.
So hello everyone. Short, who am I? So actually I was born in Germany. Then for studying I went to Innsbruck to Austria. Then I went to Silicon Valley. Then unfortunately Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, so entire economy crashed, and I went back to Germany. Then some year later, my dad convinced me to move to Zurich, where I did not live that long. Then I moved to St. Gallen, and last weekend I moved to Horn. So that's me. Maybe some of you still know it's quite an old project in the meantime. It's HTML Webpack plugin, or the CSS property textbox trim, or one of my latest projects is Nextjack. And I'm working as a front-end lead at Digitec Galaxus, mainly for two things: architecture and all the product detail stuff. So if you see a product detail page and it looks totally broken, then maybe that was me. Maybe some things about Galaxus, because those are more or less our constraints. So a lot of things are given, and we try to do the best out of that. So all what I show you with CSS and so on today might not be the best thing for you, because you probably have different constraints than we do. So we have around 32 million products. You can buy only 8 million out of that, because a lot of them went out of stock. Imagine old TVs or stuff like that. Quite a variety of products. So what maybe might also be surprising, all products which exist on Digitec are also on Galaxus, but the Galaxus products are not all on Digitec. We have also now shops in Italy, in France, in Austria, Netherlands, but in all those countries we only have the Galaxus brand. So it started all with Digitec, then moved over to Galaxus, and now Digitec is kind of the legacy, which has less products and is only in Switzerland. But it still has a good brand, and so we keep it. What might also be interesting, it's all countries, all languages, also Digitec and Galaxus, everything works on the same machine. So of course there are a lot of pods, but it's always the same software. So we don't do different releases for Austria and Switzerland. It's always the same state, and also for the brands it's just then in the end painted or translated differently. And also currently just in the shop, so just the software development of the shop, currently 140 people are working there. We have more people working in ERP and also logistics and all of that stuff. Just to give you a feeling. So originally I wanted to give this talk already last year, but it was something completely else. And then I tried this year again. And I thought I had so many interesting things to talk about, so I just picked randomly some stuff and hope some of them are interesting for some of you. So in the beginning, I will just give you a free crash course of CSS and some examples, and also our journey. So why would we build our own CSS compiler in Rust, which sounds quite stupid, but it works quite well for us. And also how we managed almost to lose 100,000 Swiss francs a day with CSS. That might also be interesting. So maybe how it all began. So why did people come up with the idea of CSS? So in the beginning, the web was quite boring. It was basically only text and maybe some images. And so users said, okay, I want this text to be in a bigger font, or I want it in another color with a different background. And so in your browser, you could customize all of that. So you basically customize the look of the web. And then there were more and more wishes. And at the same time, also thought, maybe we don't want to just ship black text on white pages, but maybe we want also to give it a design. So then someone thought, okay, so we need somehow a system where users and authors can both design the same documents. And that's what it was originally built for. So from Crash Course, you can build now crazy selectors. The thing is, the idea was so a user should be able to select exactly that part of the page what he wants to, and give it a style that they like. And it grew and grew and grew and grew. And this crazy selector right there is, for example, a focus trap, where you can prevent people to navigate with the keyboard to the wrong elements, which got kind of out of hand. There's also, as you can imagine, like if authors and users would style the same thing, then there have to be collisions. So there's a conflict resolution, which looks a little bit like this. So there are a lot of rules how different selectors win against each other. And if you manage to understand all that, then you just have to learn those 400 different CSS properties, which most of them have different syntaxes, different shorthands, different things and constraint what they can do or not can do. And then you're ready to go and can start developing CSS. So we at Galaxus did exactly that. And back in 2016, it was just C# with razor blade templates. So it looked a little bit like this. This is from Web Archive. Interestingly, the images still load from our production page. It's because, as I said, many of our products aren't purchasable anymore, but all the data is still there. And interestingly, some are still on the same CDN. Then, this was also before I joined Galaxus. They thought, okay, C# is outdated. We want to switch to something more cool. We want to use React. And they switched to Next.js because everyone was talking about React in 2018. And so they started, and they needed a new CSS solution. And back then, Next.js came with CSS modules as built-in solutions. So they said, okay, let's go with best practices. Let's get started. And actually, they were quite happy with their choice. So the CSS modules come with automated namespace, so you don't have the issue that maybe you have to think of a unique name. That's all done automatically. You can do whatever you like, what's possible in CSS and, of course, in the browsers. And it's as I said, it's a default for Next.js. Then over time, when the code base grew and grew and grew, one of the biggest pain points were the selectors. Like, people started to build crazy selectors, and then they started to question, hey, what does this selector actually target? Is it still used? In which cases is this used? Do we still need it? Can we remove it? And which led to that people did never delete any CSS, but they just appended it at the bottom, more and more and more. And if something conflicted, they just manages with more specificity. So this took a little bit longer, and it was really hard to maintain. So back then, Stack Component was quite hyped. So they said, okay, let's go, let's switch. It will save us some time on maintainability. Let's try this one. And they were also quite happy. That was also before I joined. As I said, oh, cool, it's also namespace. We can also write any CSS we want. We don't have to write crazy CSS selectors anymore. And we get even TypeScript properties to maintain the stuff. We know what classes are used, what part of the CSS is still used, how is it used, and the logic and so on. And so the migration from CSS modules to Stack Components took 3 years. So someone said, okay, it's a good idea, let's start. I don't know how many files and components existed back then, but today it's like 11 or 12,000 different TypeScript files. And so it takes some time to do such a big change to really replace an entire CSS technology with another one. Then a little bit later, here it does not match, they saw, oh, cool, there's Tailwind. This was, I guess, 2024. So just when they were done with Style Components migration, and I thought, okay, we should switch to Tailwind because everyone is using it, so we should too. Some devs said, hey, we just migrated, should we really do that? And I said, okay, we are building right now our component library and our design system, then at least let it use for that. So if we cannot use it for the entire shop, let's use it for our design system. And most of that is also public available. I don't know if really people outside of Galaxus would look at it, but if you would like to, you can do that. And so they tried out Tailwind, and they liked a lot of it. But they also came into some constraints where they said it's too hard to use for the entire shop. Basically, for the constraint I showed you before. So they said, okay, in some cases, it's not flexible enough for crazy hacks. It works really, really well for most cases, but there are some edge cases where it did not work at all. And the other thing is, as I said before, we are running on one instance, Galaxus and Digitec, and that requires us to be flexible to switch the themes. And also there is sometimes crazy logic, which, we have a lot of designers which come up with great idea or crazy ideas, and therefore a lot of complexity out of that. And we also saw that it has no code splitting. So if we add any new class which has never been used before to the checkout, it will also be loaded on the start page and vice versa. We, as it's one big Next.js application, so it's really a checkout and homepage and everything in between is all on the same Next.js application. It's really a lot of code in one thing, and it gets all compiled into one file. And also we saw the nightmare of Griffle, which is an atomic CSS library used by Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is you probably know Electron app more or less, and they came up with a really fancy way how they could write every CSS, and then somehow a compiler would pack it into atomic CSS classes. And in the end, they ended up with 1.2 megabyte of CSS. And because it's atomic and they don't know which of that CSS is really used in the beginning, they have to load all this 1.2 megabyte before they can render anything. And we thought, okay, maybe that's not realistic that we will end there with Tailwind, but better not try. So back to style components. So we said, okay, let's stay with style components, and actually we were still quite happy. So we saw, okay, the things which we hoped for when switching from CSS modules to style components somehow worked out. So we had less dead code, we could understand the code good enough, and also it was flexible enough to do all the crazy hacks we had in mind. And it also allowed us our theming so that we had this the possibility to use it very well for Digitec and Galaxus with different colors and all of that. A little bit later, we saw that our SEO was dropping, like the conversion of SEO wasn't working that well. And it was not much, but because of the big revenue numbers, even a little bit makes people quite concerned. And someone said, hey, maybe it's because of performance. Maybe we are just not fast enough, because a lot of people always tell you, hey, if you're not good enough in Core Web Vitals, then you will have a bad SEO rank, and then you will no longer be on the top. And so also Google says that's not the case. A lot of people still believe that. Actually, the Core Web Vitals thing is only 3% of the rank. And if you're not read in everything, then you already have more or less half of it, or even 2/3 of that. So it's then only for the last 1%. And if you're really on pair on 99%, then it might make a difference. But in most cases, that's not the case. And that's more important what's on your side, what content is there, and not if you get this point from the last percent. But still, we took a look and said, okay, so style components is known for being slow because it has a runtime. And also, we saw that devs started with the flexibility to build crazy stuff. So they built factories, which build factories, which build factories, which generate the CSS. And people said, okay, it starts to be less maintainable as we hoped for because of the crazy things we are starting to build. And but still, we thought, okay, it's still good enough. Let's keep it this way. Everything works. Let's not touch it. It's probably good enough. Then some months later, there was a performance discovery week from our app team, and they told us, oh, our app is so slow, we have to do something about that. And I was part of that group who took a look at that, and I thought, oh, because I use it every day on my phone, I thought, okay, it's fast enough. Probably a meeting about milliseconds where someone says, okay, we have to shave off some milliseconds. But then they showed more or less this video. Let's hope it works also for you. So here's a click. And there's a product detail page. And then I said, oh, okay, that's not milliseconds. We should probably do something. And the reason why I was so surprised, I've never experienced that by myself. And so I asked them, what phone is it? And they told us, so there are Android budget phones. So while Apple tried to build always the fastest and even faster and faster and faster smartphone, and also other Android phones try to do the same thing with their flagship phones, other vendors tried to build the most or the cheapest phone possible. And this one is, I believe, from last year, and you can get for around 100 francs. And it has also 6 cores and 3 cameras and a lot of RAM and big display and Wi-Fi and battery. And it's amazing how they get all that together into one piece. But unfortunately, also the stats look quite nice. It's not that fast. And there are independent scoring websites. Unfortunately, I didn't find one which is for the last year, but it goes through 2023. And here you can see it. So it's about single core scores, which is quite relevant for websites because JavaScript is single-threaded. And you can see like there's a huge gap between, back then it was iPhone 15 and flagships for Android. But those phones are fast enough. They are not the problem. The problem are here these budget phones, which when we tried that, so the Galaxy was as fast as the iPhone 6s. And that was the reason why it was so horribly slow. And so we started investigating, okay, what exactly makes it so slow? Obviously, our pages are quite overloaded because we have a lot of teams, and all of those teams develop new features, and no one wants to remove a feature, but they add and add and add. So that's obviously one reason, but we wanted to keep all features just to make it faster. So we tried to solve it technically and took a look what's happening behind the scenes. And we realized it's some performance optimization from React together with some Chromium bugs, which cause that when you would go from this start page where you click this tile and go over to the product detail page, it would start rendering the first components. And then React would say after 8 milliseconds, oh, I want to render so that I have a good FPS rate. And so it rendered, and the browser saw, oh, there's a new CSS. And unfortunately, some CSS flushes the entire browser UI cache. So it flushed the entire page, rendered the entire page. Then the next components were rendered. And again, 8 milliseconds passed. React said, OK, I need to render again. And each of these proper slots are these React does something parts together with the browser recalculates all styles. And as you can see, like almost everything of the time is wasted where the browser re-renders and re-renders and re-renders the very same page over and over again. And that's why the app is totally frozen. So also the runtime was not the problem because the runtime are these small things in between. They cause this behavior because if you have, for example, Tailwind or anything where you generate the CSS in the beginning and not on a runtime, then you don't run into the problem. You just ship the entire CSS to the browser. The browser becomes sees it. And it also has sometimes to re-render stuff, but it never gets into this issue. So we thought, OK, maybe you can go back to CSS modules, but not with the developer experience from that time because everyone hated that and didn't want to go back. So basically the experience of style components, but the speed of static CSS. And the best thing would be if we could keep more or less the same API and keep our know-how so that we don't have to learn everything from scratch. And we did a small hack, and it took one afternoon, and it somehow worked. Not entirely, but it was quite promising. And the idea is more or less quite simple. We just extract the CSS again into a static CSS, and the JavaScript part is only the thing which adds or removes class name from the DOM element, but it no longer interferes with the CSS object model. The CSS is just loaded in the beginning, can be code splitted and so on. So we get more or less the best of both worlds. And this was Next.Yak, which we released then last year. And I don't know if some of you know Josh. He mentioned it in React Paris 2024. And therefore, a lot of our users are French people. It's sometimes a little bit difficult with communication, but they are quite polite. And it's interesting how many web applications are rebuilt in France. So, like, they have their own Google Maps reinvented, they have their own Kickstarters reinvented, and they all, for some reason, want to use that because they saw that talk. And here's basically the same thing. You will see it's still slow of those budget phones because our pages are still overloaded. But the difference is feelable. Like, you really see, okay, it's way, way faster with the approach with the static CSS. Unlike before, we were able to migrate in 3 months just because we chose the same API. CSS modules was an entirely different API. And now that we know we have to migrate and we can design the API, we try to be as close as our existing one as possible. So we also had a possibility, because the API was more or less the same, that we migrated everything to the new technology. Then we did a search and replace and migrated it back to style components. And then we ran an A/B test to see how well does it perform. And we saw really great performance wins. So navigational LCP is not a core web vital metric. So Google tried to come up with that. It's basically a single page application if you switch a React route from one page to another. So not a multi-page application navigation, but a single page application. And we used their proposed code to measure that. That was quite faster. Also, like interactive to next print was faster. And what was quite amazing was also that our backends became faster, because we wasted a lot of time when a user wanted to open the homepage to generate the CSS for them. Also, the CSS which came out was almost identical for every request. We did that on every request. So we wasted a lot of resources just to do the same thing over and over and over again. So that saved us a lot of latency, and also we needed less pods deployed, so that someone even calculated how many tons of CO2 is reduced because we don't do this mess anymore. So, but unfortunately, when we went back to CSS modules now, so basically that's what comes out. It compiles it back to CSS, hands it over to Next.js. We are basically using Next.js again how it was designed. And then we realized, okay, they have long-lasting bugs. They don't care anymore for a lot of them. So now we have to somehow start working around Next.js bugs, which did not exist before for us. And also, there are some things which really cost us performance when it comes to code splitting. Good. So then some code. I thought I could show you some simple, some crazy, or some ugly code parts. I'm gonna start with good parts. So the good part is, because we are in TypeScript, we have everything like in CSS, in TypeScript constants. So we get all the advantage of that. We can write, for example, JS doc comments, and if you hover above a token, for example, here of a media query, it tells you, okay, this media query is from that point to that point, and it also gives you autocomplete and tells you which other media queries exist. And that helps us a lot because we have so many developers, also sometimes full stack developers, which don't want to do too much CSS, but just so that it works. And they are quite happy to have those constraints and to do it right. So that we can place documentation exactly for them, because we know or learned what they need and just add it to those comments and they have it at hand. Another thing which came in really, really nice were colors. So I don't know if you know, but Galaxus and Digitec comes in dark and light mode. And that comes with some complexity. As you can see, also those colors look almost same. Even these two colors are different because some designer decided they wanted to be slightly different. And it's not a problem. Basically, what we do, we design it in Figma. Like I don't know which component that was, but it's designed 4 times in Figma. And then we generate all these colors out of Figma into one CSS variable, which will, depending on whether you're on Galaxus or Digitec, use the correct color code, and also depending whether you're light or dark mode. And that helped us a lot for cases like that, where we want to have some state-based CSS style. For example, here, if that component is active, we want it to have the active color. And then on Digitec light, we want to have the Digitec light. On Digitec dark, we want Digitec dark. On Digitec automatic, we want your system preference, and the same for Galaxus. So if you sum up this for active and non-active, it comes up to 12 cases. And if we then take a look at this add to cart button, which you might have clicked sometime, then you will see that it comes up with 36 cases. And also that was one reason why we decided we don't want to go with atomic styles, because those would be 36 color tokens, CSS classes in worst case. And this is only the color. So there are a lot of more things, like we have also way too complex typography, because some designers said, okay, we need letter spacing. And as you can see, it's really quite minimal. And we only need it for Galaxus. And we want it different for bold and for regular. And and someone told them, yeah, we can do that. And since then we do that. So and have to maintain it, because it's hard to tell them, okay, we want to make it easier for devs, and therefore you can't use letter spacing anymore, because they say, no, we need it. And yeah, so also that is all part of this button. Maybe some more crazy hacks is, so one designer asked us to always show the product name in the breadcrumbs, even if we don't have enough space. So as you can see, the product is on the very right. And so we can't show everything, because we did not want to have line breaks. And this is a scrollable container. And so what we do is we just change the parent to right to left, so that the scroll bar starts on the very right. And then inside, we just do the opposite and switch it back to left to right, so that the scroll bar starts here, but the text, again, starts on the left side. And so you get initially start with scroll position on the right. Hopefully in future, so there's an idea to add initial CSS scrolling position to CSS. Let's see how long it will take until all the Fari browsers, which we have to support, add that too. So there's the one which is even more crazy. I hope I can still explain how that works. So you probably saw that there are variants for products. So we have very different products, and most of the time it's quite simple. Like you have a phone in 4 different colors, you just show them and it's okay. But we have also products with a lot of different variants, like for example here lensless, where you can choose which lens you need, and you see which is available and so on. And our designer said, we don't want to show half of the page of variants, because this information is not added by us, but by suppliers. So suppliers send us all the information, say, okay, I need 100 variants, and we just display them. So he said, okay, just let's add here, I guess I have a slide for that. Just add a show more button there, and please show it only if we need it. So if we have more than 2 lines, then show it, and otherwise don't. And obviously, you could just use JavaScript and measure, hey, how large are those containers, because they are also flexible in width and also in height. and then calculate, do you need more than 2 lines or not? Because it's different, as you saw in that before, on mobile as on desktop, because there's less space available, and also on, if you're, we are full responsive, so in every stage it could be that it wraps early or not. But unfortunately, if we would do that, then we would have layout jumps. Like, we would load the page maybe with or without this button, and then as soon as we know that we don't need it or need it, we would then add it, and then the entire page would jump. And the variants are in the upper half of the page, and it would be quite noticeable and annoying. So we just wrote some CSS which fixes this. And this is what I meant with we sometimes use crazy hacks which are really hard to do with Tailwind. So basically how that works is we render all the variants, and then after that we have a button. And this button is then with CSS grid templates rendered always in the 3rd row. So it's always here in the 3rd row. I just removed the white background so you can see that it just overlays all those buttons. And that's why, so the 1st row has just the height it needs from the elements, the 2nd also. The 3rd row, if it exists, has, for the variants, has the height of the button. So, so the button itself has no size, but it can, but it is placed in the 3rd row. So if any element is in the 3rd row, it will size up the 3rd row, and there's a place for that button. Otherwise, it would just, with overflow hidden, be cut off. And all the crazy serials you see here are rows below, because we found some products which had so many rows that it looked quite strange, because they appeared below the show more button and just bleeded into the rest of the page. So then we just added more zeros and it was fixed. So then I have one very last thing. This is, so we do a lot of A/B testing, and there was one thing where people asked over and over and over and over again. So they told us, hey, we want dark mode, and I showed you before we built dark mode, and we ignored it for a very, very long time, because designers said, nah, we don't want dark mode. And there are good reasons for that. For example, if you have products, the photos of them are always on bright backgrounds. And if you have maybe a glass which is in front of a white background, you could even use some AI or stuff to make it transparent, but you would not be able to see the product anymore on black background. So they said, oh, okay, we want it on white background and keep the original background. Also, some suppliers would not allow us to alter the images. So if you start changing Apple's images, that would be quite painful, and they would ask you to stop that. So we ignored it for a very long time, but people came up over and over again, hey, we need dark mode, we need dark mode. So then we thought, okay, how hard can it be? We thought, oh, okay, browser support looks quite nice. Just check if the user wants dark mode and enable it. It took, I believe, a half or a whole year to build it with several devs, and we had to migrate all the code because everything was only bright mode, light mode, and we had to build it. And also some designers said, okay, in that case, I need a board and only in dark mode and only on Galaxus, but not there. And so until we had all of that, it took some time. But after, I would say, half a year or so, we had done most of it. And then we started with a HB test. So we started with basically the baseline, which is unchanged, and then variant 1 and 2, which are pretty much the same thing. So actually, one is in both cases, we just only checked for the user system's preference. So if the user preferred a dark side, it would be dark. If not, it would still be white. And here in that case, we just show also a notification where we tell them, hey, you can switch back to light mode if you don't like dark mode. So the results. We checked how many people have preferred color mode to dark, and it was about 38%. So 60% of the people had still the same thing. 75, because the baseline was still white for light for all users. So then we measured how did that affect our revenue, and we saw that, okay, per day we would lose for variant 1, 45,000 Swiss francs, and for variant 2, 48,000. So if you had the notification which said, hey, do you want to switch back, it was even worse. And this test ran for 13 days, and then they said, okay, we have to stop that. And some calculated it up and said, okay, if also baseline would also ship dark mode, like variant 1 and 2, and we would run that for an entire year, it would cost us about 55 million in revenue per year. So that's basically all. I could tell hours and hours and hours more. If you want to learn more or anything, just reach out or meet me at a beer. Any direct questions?
You mentioned the 0.01 letter spacing.
Yes.
Have you ever considered just removing it and seeing if anyone actually noticed it?
We have enough designers who would really see that. Especially like, so there the nuance is really, really small, but for bold it's more. So there, they say, okay, if the letters are more bold, then they want a little bit more spacing, so it's still good to read. And it also depends from the font size. So the larger it gets, the different is the letter spacing. And we wanted also to use Figma variable for that, where you can have all this magic which does all the fonts changing automatically. And there it's not possible to switch font size and letter spacing. So they said, okay, let's stop that. We do that all by hand, just because of those small nuances. And that was actually work for the designers, not for the devs.
Since you had to optimize quite for some slow mobile phones, do you have like now also like some mobile phone testings and like some regular performance testing on different devices? Or is that just something that you did once and just now hope for the best?
So when we started with all these core web vitals, we set up different Datadog tests, which would do more in detail tracking of performance, so that we read, so that we get the best possible information about how fast things really work. And what we even do is, if you have a slow interaction to next paint, you click something and nothing happens, and main thread is blocked, and then the browser tells you which element was responsible for that. And I don't know if you saw, but all class names are minified. We have then a source map, which would, when this error reaches Datadog, would resolve to the TypeScript file and can really identify which team is responsible and which component is responsible. And then we have charts which show which teams has the worst performance issues. And then we have some framework teams who spend from time to time some clean-out things, and they really go to teams and say, you have to fix that, that's too slow. Because teams most of the time don't look for that. So yeah, we do it regularly. But yeah, from time to time you see it grows and grows, and you look at that and say, okay, something's not good, but I won't fix it today. And then some weeks later you see, oh, it grew even more, it got even slower, and then there comes a time where you then just invest some time and try to find out.
But you only have the feedback in the aftermath. It would be like more beneficial to have it like as part of the CI integration.
Absolutely, but that's quite difficult because, as I said, we have so many million different products. So, for example, we had one layout shift on the product page, and we searched for that over and over again. It was like we really saw in the numbers that something jumped, but we checked the pages ourselves on different devices. Everything looked smooth, everything perfect, and then we found out it was because of PlayStation 5 launch, which showed a lot of product pages where the PlayStation was not available. And if that happened, then there was a small banner which said, okay, we don't have a PlayStation 5, but what about an Xbox? And that jumped in. But you really had to find this product which had no products available and had a recommendation for another product to find this specific core web vital issue. And you can imagine that you have products with comments, without comments. There are so many different things, that also with recommendation and so on. You cannot test all variations in all the different countries. We have a repairability index, for example, for France, where you can see if browsers are repairable. Different legal requirements per country is endless. And then dark mode, light mode, Digitec, Galaxus. So.
For the dark mode, have you thought about just enabling it during the night?
Yeah. So most systems, if you have system mode, have some switch like that. So we also thought a lot of why could it happen that people would not buy anymore. So one reason is obviously they did not like the design. That's possible. Or they would think they are not on Galaxus, that they somehow got to a phishing website or something, so maybe those numbers would improve over time. But back then, so the thing is we invested so much time in building that they didn't want to remove it again. So they said, okay, we invested like dev time for $500,000. We want to somehow keep this feature. So they moved it down in the bottom and hid it. But it was still there if user would scroll there, which seldom happened. And by default, it was always light mode. And now, some time later, they decide, come on, let's move it further up. So now it's back in a visible area again. And we just hope that it now performs better. I believe there was not a second A/B test because people knew it would not perform well. Yeah?
Do you know what Stylex, and did you look at that?
Yes. Stylex was also this static CSS compiler, right? So they use what you want in CSS as a base, which is built on Babel. And what they do is they extract the entire, like they split your entire code base and try to move out only the things which might be interesting for CSS. And then they execute the entire code. And they do that on every code change. So basically you change a line of code, then they try to split all out of that into a JavaScript bundle and execute it right away to get the CSS constants from JavaScript. And it's horribly slow. What was funny, we watched at the CSS technologies for a while and tried a lot of them. And we did not want to build it ourselves because why would you want to do that? And sometime later, Material UI started Pigment CSS. And Pigment CSS basically uses the same layer like Stylex, also what you want in CSS. And we also had some exchanges with them because their ideas were quite aligned. They did it differently and had a different case and so on. But they stopped doing it. Like in December, they stopped the project because they said it's so slow for compile times that they entirely stopped. Yeah?
You said you spent $500,000 on dev time for dark mode.
Roundabout, yes.
Yeah. Can you put that into perspective on how much dev time you spend a month or a week or a year or something?
So the thing is, like the devs involved in that, they worked almost a year, but they did not do that by 100% because it was done by a framework team, which had a lot of different tasks. It makes it really hard to estimate. But they, for example, before we saw with the shadcn and the CLI tool, which would compile Figma to variables and CSS, basically we built the same thing. And it worked, but then someone came up with a new idea, then those features were added. So over time, there was also maintenance costs. Like if you build these tools, you have to maintain them. Sometimes they break or you have to update them. And so it added up with cost. And so that's probably, yeah, $500,000. It's hard to tell. Yeah.
In one slide, you mentioned that you also see a reduction on the server side. Can you explain? Because I only think that you serve that static asset over a CDN and then it's executed on the client. But how does it come that you save also on the server side?
We have server-side rendering.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
And thank you again for that talk.
Thanks.
Good, then only a third time if you want to have a talk on the 17th of September, the next one is. And in about 15 minutes, the pizza should arrive. So until then, have a beer and enjoy the great balcony. And thank you for coming.